So coded.
They didn't tell me about this part. Is this working okay? Woo! Awesome. Yeah, so I heard a little bit, I guess, from Torben about the venue, so I knew it was going to be something kind of unique, and I knew a lot of fun people were going to come, but I didn't know it was going to be like this. Like, this is really awesome. So I wanted to say thanks for everyone who organized it, and thanks everyone for coming, because I'm really looking forward to the next 2 days here. I made a talk about making things. I called it craftstructionism, which is just like a made-up word. I think I'm not trying to bash on computers or anything, because I love making things for computers. It's what I've been doing for work for 10 years, and it's something I really love doing. But I think when you're making something in the real world, it satisfies this whole other need. And I forgot to start the timer. Okay. I've never timed something with one of these before. So you're solving a problem that exists in real space, and when you're done with whatever your solution is, it's something that's tangible. You could touch it, you interact with it, you could feel it, and you start discovering new materials and new mediums. So making things in the real world, it really nicely complements making like web apps. There's just things about the creative process that are the same, no matter if you're making something in the real world or you're doing a project or an app. Just to introduce myself, I mean, there was that epic introduction, but my name is Jessica. If you're into like coffee and comic books, like photo decoration apps and baby unicorns, we might have something in common. I live in San Francisco. This is the park by my house. There's a lot of cool tech events happening in SF all the time, and I'm just going to quickly mention one that's coming up. There's this 2-day getting started with programming and building web apps workshop called Rails Girls. And we had one in January, and there's a really cool turnout. It was a really fun event because there's so many coaches and speakers who just volunteer their time on Friday and Saturday to introduce a bunch of new people to web application development. So we're doing it again. We're going to have it in October on the 11th and 12th. So if you know anyone in SF who wants to coach or wants to attend, they could check out that website and they should come. And there's one other more specific gathering that I'm into called JessConf. It's just a gathering of developers named Jessica. So I'm not kidding. There's a lot of us. So there's Jessica Dillon, Jessica Suttles, and Jessica Golding and me at JessConf 3, which coincided with Waza. And then at Nordic Ruby, we got Jess Eldridge. And then at Distill, just last month, we got Jessica Lord. So if your name's Jessica, talk to me after this, and we'll like add you to the club. Let me tell you a little bit about where I work. I work with a bunch of awesome developers and designers at Engine Yard. And for a little disclaimer, not all of the individuals on this slide are still at the company. But we still do this thing where when we take off for lunch, we try and see how many people we could fit in the smallest elevator. We're up to like 12 now. If you're not familiar, Engine Yard is like a place to host and scale your web apps. My job title there is the UX Party Cat, because they let me choose it. So I work on our application and just how our customers use it and how to design new features. It looks like this now. It's a Rails app. And then currently we're working on making a new front end in AngularJS. Lately, I've been thinking about my role as a designer because it's not something that I just do for work. It's something that bleeds into every aspect of my life. And when I think about like what being a designer even means to me, I think of it as the ability to make the world that you want to live in. So I'm not sure who said this, but it's the way that a lot of designers look at life, and it's kind of like an approach you can take to things. And for me, it's about being able to solve problems and just make new things that have a purpose. And the end result is that you get to do things exactly the way you want. So you can improve the world and do things the way you want and kind of enhance it as you go. Whenever I'm like not working on something on the computer, my favorite thing to do is to make things in real life. So I'm always thinking about like what I want to build, how I want to modify things, and like change the world around me. We live in like a world where everything is almost like available to you. Like there's so many things that are already made, and there's so many options, and like it's easy to think of it yourself as just kind of curating what you have by choosing from these options and kind of shopping for them. And there's this huge difference between making it yourself. So I'm not going to say that like every time a friend has a birthday, I make them a card from scratch, because that's totally not realistic. But if you just spend a small portion of your time making things, it has a lot of really great benefits. One is that you get to be very specific and make what you want. So you can customize something to exactly what you need. You start to research and explore new techniques and materials, and it takes you places that you wouldn't normally be. I think once you see what goes into making stuff, you start to appreciate other people's work and materials and labor a lot more. And maybe the best part is it like feels really good. Like if you're shopping for something, there's like this instant gratification, but it kind of goes away. But if you make something, it's something that sticks with you, and it's really empowering. So I'm going to share 3 examples of things that I've made. The first thing is something kind of fun and recreational using a needle and thread. The next is something practical, and large scale, involving trips to the hardware store. And then third is about using web development tools to make something fun. So I have loved sewing for many years, and I especially love it when there's like a costume party coming up or Halloween. So I'm going to share an example of a costume that I made last year and show the steps that went into making it. So last Halloween, I somehow convinced 8 friends to dress as Sailor Moon and the Sailor Scouts with me. If you don't know what Sailor Moon is, it's like a 90s cartoon. It's like a crime-fighting high schooler. And you could buy these kind of costumes online, of course, for all like Halloween stuff. But they're usually kind of like poorly made. You don't know if it's going to fit, and it's kind of overpriced. So I wanted to make my own and be, in control of the fit and the materials. I chose Sailor Neptune because I really liked her teal hair. And we started out by doing some research. First, I watched between 1 and a few dozen episodes of Sailor Moon. Then I looked online at other people's costumes, because this has been done before, and I just wanted to see how other people solved the same problem. After doing that research, I started sketching out kind of my ideas of like what my plan was to make it. And this was like a super important part, because I was able to share my plan with other people and other girls making the costumes, so that we could like just collaborate and give advice to each other. And then also when you're sketching it, you start thinking and seeing of all the details that you're gonna need to do. So you start like kind of planning the process that you're gonna need to do after, and all the steps. Like from this plan, I made a shopping list so that I could hopefully just go to the sewing like fabric store one time. And then the next step is just to execute. So I'll just kind of quickly go through some of the steps like involved in this project. So first I put the top together, then I pleated and pinned and attached the skirt, and then I made the collar, made crowns for everyone, or headbands, I don't know. There's a bow for the front, bow for the back. And as I went along, I would try it on, like adjust the fit, make sure everything is like progressing properly. There was details like a ankle ribbon thing, and there's some stuff, of course, I couldn't make, like shoes and the hair, so I ordered a wig, and it got delivered to the office. So on Halloween day, I wore my costume to work, and I took this picture. And I think whenever you have like a really at-work professional picture like this, it's important that you update your social network. And so on Halloween night, I met up with Tuxedo Mask, the rest of the Sailor Scouts, and the rest of the night was about as blurry as this picture. And for me, I feel like I've been sewing a while, but I started out by sewing from patterns. So you can get patterns from Berta or Simplicity, and you just trace the paper onto the fabric and follow instructions. It makes things a lot easier. And there's a book called the Colette Sewing Handbook, and it kind of teaches just like basics about how you start from a pattern, alter it there, make decisions like to make whatever you want. So once you understand the basics, then you could start taking your skills and applying them to something maybe less conventional. So someone who's done this super well is an artist named Ben Venom. I can tell you guys are all probably super into like Sailor Moon cosplay, but I also wanted to show how these traditional sewing techniques can be used to make things that are very like out of the ordinary and kind of badass. So he takes these old heavy metal t-shirts and like denim and stuff, and he makes quilts. And he's using the same sewing techniques that have been used in like sewing circles for generations. It's like standard quilt making. But he draws inspiration from heavy metal music, motorcycle gangs, occult icons. So his stuff ends up looking really cool. And if you don't have a sewing machine, there's little stuffed animals you can make called plushies. And so if you start with something small like this, it's kind of like an easy win sewing project. And you could get patterns from them on that like blog for the Totoro, or if you search on DeviantArt, people share their like handmade patterns, and then other people download them or print them and make them. I think that's a Pokemon. I don't watch Pokemon. If you need inspiration, if you look on Etsy, there's a lot of plushies that people make and sell. This is Gunter the Penguin from Adventure Time. And another thing I saw on Etsy were these catnip eyeballs. So I actually made these for the cats in my life one year, and they were like very well received and it's really fun to watch like cats bat around eyeballs on the floor. Okay, so moving on to the next project. One of the ways that design and construction kind of relates more closely to my job is something that I started doing last year. I got interested in upgrading to a standing desk. I was like, I think reading a lot of articles about how there are like kind of productivity and health benefits to spending less time sitting at a desk. So I was looking to buy one, but I noticed that they're really expensive. Like the nice looking ones especially, and even some of the not nice looking ones were still like $1,000. So I decided I wanted to try and make my own. For inspiration, I was looking at like fancy design blogs and some apartment therapy, and looking at pre-made stuff from Crate and Barrel. And then I started looking at like other kind of DIY desks and like people who make it themselves. So there's this type of style of construction using steel plumbing pipes as the main scaffolding. So there's like these legs of steel pipe, and then they use a hardwood top. So this one is from Urban Wood Goods. And then there's also ones by Sawdust Industry. And so I decided I wanted to make a desk like this, but make it up high. In doing some research to calculate the height I needed, there's this website, Tinkering Monkey, that has a kind of a chart to show you how to make the right height and the right monitor angle and stuff like that. Basically, if you're standing and you bend your arm, you measure the height of your elbow, and that should be the desktop surface. So I think mine was like 43 inches, and I started sketching out my plan. So this was like my dream desk, and I had to share this with like other people who've built things before, and I brought it with me to the hardware store every time I went, because the people who work there are like much more expert in building things than I was. The price for all the materials was about $300. I mean, as long as you don't include the labor you're gonna do yourself. So I got the countertop just from IKEA. It's probably not as cool as like getting something reclaimed wood and like cutting it down, but I didn't have like a table saw, so I wanted something that was close to being ready. So I got this one, and it's very strong. It's made from oak, and it's for kitchens. Brought it to the office. And then we sanded it with like first kind of a coarse grit, and then something more fine. I had a helper. then I stained it with something really close to the original color because I didn't want like water to spill on it and then leave some gross stain. So I put 2 coats of this wood stain on it. And that was just the top. The legs were probably the more interesting part. I had to go to the hardware store to get the steel pipe tubing. And if you go to a big hardware store or a plumbing supply store, they cut it for you. So they use this pretty crazy machine in the aisle with like no protective glasses. And you just use the measurements you did when you were planning it and tell them the lengths you want. They cut everything, and they even add the threading so that you can screw all the parts together. This is probably one of the most heavy projects I've made. Like I had to have like a car and like 2 people to carry it in. But after I got it in, assembly is super easy. You just screw everything together, and it's also a really durable material. So this desk is like, it's like a battleship basically. Instead of having the exposed metal industrial look, I wanted something a little more polished, so I painted it first white and then decided I wanted to go black. So I painted it matte black. Brought the 2 pieces into the office and attached it with just some wood screw. And it's still in our office, and we use it every day. I really like it. It's my favorite one. So it's big enough for like 2 people to pair on. And if you notice, like the monitor stand isn't a stack of books, because I think that always looks kind of bad. So instead, just like we did for the desktop, like I got some blocks of wood from the hardware store, sanded them and stained them, and then it made a really nice monitor stand. All right, so that's just an example of, building something for your workspace. And then the next story has more to do with the sort of things that a lot of us do for work. I think if you're passionate about making things yourself and you want to like be able to have control and do stuff your way, sometimes if you can't do that during your day job, you want to have a side project and something you can work on after work. I definitely feel like I fit into that category. So this is an example project I just built for fun, and I'll just tell you how it came about. It started as an inside joke. So it was between myself, my friend, and Commander William Riker. So this is Jonathan Frakes. For those of you that don't know, he's the actor that plays Riker in Star Trek: The Next Generation. And since this story involves Star Trek, my friend is just gonna have to remain nameless. Like, we'll just call her E. And whenever E and I were at like comic book conventions and we saw that Jonathan Frakes was there, like signing autographs in some secret room, we got excited and we were like, oh, maybe we'll meet him in the hallway, just casually, because we were both big fans when we were little, and obviously aren't anymore. But we were always just kind of like on the lookout, and so much like that. Like it even would happen at like the airport after the convention. We were like, maybe he'll be on the same plane. And so we called our search party the Frakes Quest. And after many hours of like fruitless searching, one time someone jokingly brought up this idea of Star Trek lorem ipsum. And so lorem ipsum is just like Latin text that designers sometimes use in layouts if they don't have the final copy and they just want to fill it with some words. So I wanted to make this ipsum idea apply specifically to Frakes Quest and make Riker-specific lorem ipsum. So I had used lorem ipsum before, but I've never made it myself. So the first step was doing some research. I looked at some other joke ipsums. If you go like meettheipsums.com, it has like tons of them, but that wasn't there at the time. I looked at hipster ipsum, and just kind of looked at the interface where you choose how much you want, then you say beer me and it gives you some. There's also cupcake ipsum, same sort of thing where it's a form. So when I started sketching Riker ipsum, I was kind of doing the same thing, like making this form, you choose how much, and then it will generate text. But as I started sharing this with other designers for feedback, they had some ideas to kind of make it more simple. So as you can see, like these kind of like sketching steps that are more familiar to like web development, like wireframing, is really the same as what I do for like real world projects too. And so I made this form that you fill out and then it generates ipsum, and decided to try and take it in new directions. One thing I experimented with was a slider so that you could go from like first season Riker to like last season Riker to get more ipsum. And as I shared this with others, someone suggested that when the page first loads, it already starts with a quote so that someone knows what's going to happen kind of a bit more immediately. I just kept toying with the controls until it was just a less and a more button. And that way, when you click the more, it reveals it quote by quote. And it just seemed a bit more funny that way. So I'm sure you're all probably curious about how I compiled this like fantastic collection of William Riker quotes. But unfortunately, I can't tell you today. That secret's going to have to die with me. No, I'm just kidding. I would spend like a lot of nights combing through TNG transcripts and just hand selecting the best ones. So this is what the final product looked like. I chose a font that was kind of like Star Trek-y and then used the galaxy picture from the Hubble telescope in the background. And this is just, I mean, it was really just to share with one person to like, I don't know, to joke around. But after I posted it, like on Twitter, like a bunch of other nerds, I mean, like internet friends, found it funny too, and it got picked up by like Boing Boing and K. So it like made me happy that like other people thought my stupid idea was like actually pretty fun. So this is just an example of how I use the same JavaScript and CSS tools that I use pretty much every day at work to create something fun, and it just solves a completely different problem, and it just reaches a new audience that I wouldn't normally design for. And in case you were wondering, the quest continues. There was a sighting last week at this flea market in Berlin. So I'll just start collecting these pictures. So let's recap. I gave 3 examples of things that I could have like easily purchased or just used that are already available. But instead, I just wanted to make them myself. And it allowed me to customize them and make them like to my exact specifications. And I think even though each was a totally different medium and the results are like these totally different things, the overarching process is exactly the same. You start out with an idea of something you want. You do some research to see kind of what's already out there and kind of expand your mind to like different possibilities. You start with just planning out by sketching and sharing those sketches so that you could have a more clear picture of what your path to execution is going to be. And then you make it happen. So trying new things like learning to work with new materials, and I think it just expands the way that you approach problem solving at work and in everyday life. And even if you don't consider yourself a designer, or if design doesn't feel like it comes naturally to you, I think if you use this process, you could approach something new and have success with it. So the best part is like after you've created something successfully yourself, it feels just like very, very rewarding. I hope I spelled this right. Choose. Thanks so much. My Twitter is Jessica Spacecat, and I'm really looking forward to hanging out these next 2 days and working on stuff. So thanks.